The stars were dying one by one. Ambassador Kylo stood on the observation deck of the Valerian High Council building, watching the night sky through the transparent dome. Where bright points of light once decorated the darkness, now only empty, black spaces remained. The void swarm had been eating their way through the galaxy for months, turning entire star systems into nothing. His 4 arms trembled as he held the ancient datapad. The words on the screen seemed impossible to believe. After searching through thousands of old galactic records, he had found something that might save his people. But the price might be worse than death itself. "Ambassador," called a voice behind him. Kylo turned to see Council Member Zara approaching. Her blue skin looked pale with worry. "The emergency session is starting. Have you found anything?" Kylo looked back at the datapad. The file was marked with warnings in 17 different languages. Most of them said the same thing. Do not use unless all hope is lost. "I found something," he said quietly. "But I do not think we will like it." They walked together through the crystal corridors of the council building. Other Valerians moved past them with quick, nervous steps. Everyone knew the Void Swarm would reach their home world in less than 2 days. Their military had tried to fight the machines. Every ship they sent never came back. The council chamber was full of worried voices. 12 council members sat around a circular table made of glowing stone. Each represented a different colony world, or at least they used to. Half of those worlds were gone now, eaten by the swarm. "Order! Order!" called Chief Counselor Vex. His old voice cracked with stress. "Ambassador Kylo has news about our options." Kylo stood and activated the datapad's projector. Ancient text appeared in the air above the table. Most of it was in languages that no longer existed. "This is the last resort protocol," Kylo said. "It was created during the First Galactic War, over 1,000 years ago. When a species faces complete extinction, they can activate an emergency beacon." "And what does this beacon do?" asked Counselor Mira. Kylo swallowed hard. "It calls the Deathworlders." The room went completely silent. Every Valerian knew stories about the Deathworlders. They were creatures from the edge of space, beings so violent and dangerous that other species refused to speak their real name. Children were told scary stories about them to make them behave. "You cannot be serious," whispered Counselor Tran. "Those things, they are monsters. They kill for pleasure. They eat their own young." "Those are just stories," Kylo said, though. His voice was not confident. "Are they?" demanded Counselor Hex. "My grandmother lived through the siege of Proxima. She saw what the Deathworlders did to the Krex Empire. They did not just defeat them. They made them disappear from history." Kylo touched the datapad again. New information appeared in the air. According to these records, the Deathworlders helped create the modern galactic peace treaties. They agreed to stay away from civilized space in exchange for being left alone. But the emergency beacon still works. It still calls them when needed. Chief Counselor Vex leaned forward. His eyes were very old and very tired. "What exactly do we know about them?" "Real facts, not stories." Kylo read from the datapad. "They come from a world called Earth. Their planet was so dangerous that living there made them into perfect killers. They have no natural enemies because they became the most dangerous thing on their world. When they came to space, other species tried to make them follow galactic law. The Deathworlders said no." "And then what happened?" asked Counselor Mira. "War," Kylo said simply. "The Galactic Alliance sent 3 different fleets to force them to obey. None of those fleets came back. The Alliance tried to negotiate. The Deathworlders agreed to stay in their own space, but they would not follow anyone else's rules." "Counselor," Tran stood up. "So you want to invite these monsters to our home? You want to bring creatures that even the old Galactic Alliance feared?" "I want to save our people," Kylo said. "Look outside. Watch the stars disappear. The Void Swarm does not negotiate. It does not stop. It only eats. Our military is gone. Our allies have run away. We have 47 hours before the swarm reaches our planet. The council members looked at each other. They had no good choices left. What if the Deathworlders decide they like our world? Asked Counselor Hex. What if they stay after the swarm is gone? Kylo touched the data pad one more time. The oldest part of the file appeared in the air. It was written in ancient Valerian, from the time when their people first reached the stars. There is something else, he said. Something I found in our own historical records. During the early days of space travel, when our colony ships were lost and dying, someone helped us. Someone gave us the technology to save our people and build new homes. He paused, looking around the room. Those helpers never told us their name. They just called themselves Friends from Earth. The room was quiet again. Every Valerian learned about the Great Rescue in school. It was the most important event in their history. Without that help, their species would have died in space hundreds of years ago. You think the Deathworlders helped us? Whispered Counselor Mira. I think. They are not as simple as the stories say, Kylo replied. And I think we owe them a debt we never knew we had. Chief Counselor Vex stood up slowly. All in favor of activating the last resort protocol? One by one, hands went up around the table. Not everyone voted yes, but enough did. The motion passes. Vex said, Ambassador Kylo, prepare the beacon. 2 hours later, Kylo stood in the communication center deep under the council building. Ancient machines that had not been used for centuries hummed to life. The beacon was older than their civilization, built by species that no longer existed. The technician, a young Valerian named Kess, looked nervous. Ambassador, are you sure about this? Once we send the signal, we cannot take it back. Kylo looked at the screens showing the Void Swarm. The machines were getting closer. In a few more hours, they would be close enough to start eating the outer planets of their solar system. Send it, he said. Kess pushed the activation button. A pulse of energy shot out from their planet, moving faster than light itself. It carried a simple message in the old emergency code. Species facing extinction. Request immediate assistance. All other options exhausted. The signal raced through space, past the Void Swarm, past the empty systems where stars used to shine. It traveled for hours through the darkness, heading toward the edge of known space. Somewhere out there, in the dark places where civilized beings feared to go, something received the message. And in the deep black of space, engines that had been sleeping for decades began to wake up. The Deathworlders were coming. Captain Deho was drinking his morning coffee when the emergency beacon changed his life forever. The bridge of the New Soul was quiet during the night shift. Most of the crew was sleeping as the colony ship drifted through space near the galactic rim. They were on a routine patrol, checking for asteroids and space debris that might threaten the human settlements in this sector. Deho liked the quiet times. After 20 years in space, he had learned to enjoy the peaceful moments. They never lasted long. Captain, called Communications Officer Park from her station. I am picking up something strange. It looks like an old emergency signal. Deho set down his coffee mug and walked over to her console. The screen showed waves of energy that pulsed in a pattern he had not seen in years. That is a last resort protocol signal, he said quietly. I have not seen one of those since the academy. Lieutenant Mi Young looked up from the navigation station. She was Deho's second in command and had been with him for 8 years. Her dark eyes were serious. Captain, those protocols are only used when a species is about to go extinct. Who would send something like that? Let me see the source, Deho said. Park worked at her console for a few minutes. The signal is coming. From Valerian space, about 40 light years from here. Deho felt his chest get tight. The Valerians. He knew that name very well. Wake up, Chief Engineer Tae Min, he ordered. Tell him to come to the bridge immediately. Mi-young stood up and walked over to him. She kept her voice low so the other crew members could not hear. Captain, we cannot get involved in alien politics. You know what happened the last time humans tried to help another species? We are still paying for that mistake. Dae-ho knew she was right. 30 years ago, humans had tried to stop a war between two alien civilizations. The humans succeeded, but both alien species turned against them afterward. They said humans were too violent, too dangerous to be trusted. That was when humanity agreed to stay away from the intergalactic territories. The bridge doors opened, and Chief Engineer Taemin walked in. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady hands. Dae-ho had served with him for 15 years. You called for me, Captain? Taemin, do you remember the Valerians? The older man's face changed. His eyes got distant, like he was remembering something from long ago. Of course I remember. They saved my family. Mi-young looked confused. What are you talking about? Taemin sat down at an empty console. This was before you were born, Lieutenant. Back when Earth was dying. The climate was broken, the oceans were rising, and billions of people needed to leave the planet. I know the history, Mi-young said. Human colony ships spread out across the galaxy. What the history books do not tell you, Taemin continued, is that most of those colony ships were failing. We had the ships, but we did not have the technology to keep people alive during long journeys through space. Thousands of ships were lost. Dae-ho picked up the story. The Valerians found our ships drifting in space. Dead ships full of dead families. They could have just taken our technology and left us to die. Instead, they gave us the life support systems that saved millions of human lives. They never asked for anything in return, Taemin added. They just said they hoped we would do the same for someone else someday. Mi-young looked at the communication console where the emergency signal was still pulsing. And now they are asking for help. They are not asking, Dae-ho corrected. A last resort protocol means they have no other choices left. Someone or something is about to wipe them out completely. The bridge was quiet except for the soft humming of the ship's engines. Each person was thinking about what this meant. Captain, Park said from her station, I am getting more information about the signal. It mentions something called the Void Swarm. Taemin went very pale. I have heard of that. Ships on the far trade routes have been talking about it for months. Some kind of machine intelligence that eats entire star systems. Eats them? Mi-young asked. Turns everything into energy and raw materials, Taemin explained. Stars, planets, ships, people, everything. Then it moves on to the next system. Dae-ho walked back to his captain's chair and sat down. He looked at the main screen, which showed the stars outside their ship. Somewhere out there, an entire civilization was about to die. Captain, Mi-young said carefully, even if we wanted to help, what could we do? We are one ship, one old colony vessel with basic weapons. We are not the only human ship out here, Dae-ho said. There are dozens of vessels in this sector, mining ships, research vessels, patrol boats. You want to start a war? Mi-young said. It was not a question. I want to pay a debt. Communications Officer Park turned around in her chair. Captain, I have been monitoring galactic communications. There are reports that the Void Swarm has already destroyed 17 Valerian colonies. Their military tried to fight it and failed. How long do they have? Dae-ho asked. According to the signal, the swarm will reach their home world in 36 hours. Dae-ho stood up and walked to the front of the bridge. He looked out at the stars and thought about all the human families that the Valerians had saved so many years ago. His own grandparents had been on one of those failing colony ships. Captain, Mi-young said, if we do this, there is no going back. The other galactic species will remember that humans interfered again. They will say we are too violent, too dangerous. We might lose what little acceptance we have gained. Maybe. Deho said. Or maybe it is time to remind the galaxy why they were afraid of us in the first place. He turned around to face his crew. Tay Min, how fast can you get our engines running at maximum power? Give me 20 minutes. Park, send a coded message to all human vessels in this sector. Tell them we have a last resort protocol from the Valerians. Include our current heading. Yes, sir. Mi Young, plot a course for Valerian space. Best possible. Speed. Mi Young did not move for a moment. Then she nodded and went to her station. Captain, she said as she worked, you know this is probably a suicide mission, even if other human ships join us. We are talking about fighting something that destroyed an entire military. I know. And you know that even if we somehow win, the other species will hate us for it. They will say we proved that humans are violent, monsters who cannot be trusted. I know that too. Then why? Deho sat back down in his captain's chair. He picked up his coffee mug, but the coffee had gone cold. Because sometimes being the monster is the right thing to do. The new soul turned toward Valerian space and began to accelerate. Behind them, other human ships were receiving the message and making their own choices. In the depths of space, an ancient debt was about to be paid. The message spread through human space like fire through dry grass. Admiral Insu was reviewing supply reports on the bridge of the heavy cruiser Busan's Pride when his communications officer brought him the coded transmission. He read it twice, then called for his senior staff. Ladies and gentlemen, he said to the officers gathered around the tactical table, we have a situation. He activated the holographic display. The message from Captain Deho appeared in the air above them, along with star charts showing the location of Valerian space. The Valerians sent a last resort protocol. Captain Deho of the New Soul is responding. He is asking for any available human vessels to join him. Commander Lee, his tactical officer, leaned forward. Admiral, the Valerians are 43 light-years away. Even at maximum speed, it will take us 18 hours to reach them. And according to this message, added Chief Medical Officer Yoon, they only have 36 hours before this void. Swarm reaches their home world. Admiral Insu studied the star charts. The Valerian system was deep in civilized space, far from the human territories near the galactic rim. If human ships went there, every major alien government would know about it. Sir, said Commander Lee, I should point out that we do not have authorization for this kind of operation. The Human Colonial Council specifically ordered us to avoid involvement in alien conflicts. I know what the Council ordered, Insu replied. I also know what the Valerians did for us during the Great Migration. He touched a control on the table. New information appeared on the display showing old records from the colonial era. My grandfather was on the colony ship Daegu when it lost power in deep space. 300 families were going to die in the dark. The Valerians found them and gave them the technology to reach safety. The room was quiet. Every human knew stories like this. The Valerians had helped save millions of human lives during the exodus from Earth. Admiral, Commander Lee said carefully, even if we want to help, what can we do against something that destroyed an entire alien military? We are not a warship. We are a heavy cruiser designed for patrol and escort duty. Then we better find some warships, Insu said. He turned to his communications officer. Send a priority message to all human vessels within 50 light-years. Military, civilian, commercial. Anyone who can fight. What should the message say, sir? Tell them the Valerians need help. Tell them Admiral Insu is calling in every favor and breaking every rule to pay an old debt. Tell them to come armed. 3 hours later, responses began coming in from across human space. Captain Ji-hoon of the assault frigate Gwangju was the first to respond. His ship was small but heavily armed, designed for hit-and-run attacks against pirates and raiders. Admiral, his message said, the Gwangju is ready to fight. We will meet you at the rendezvous point. The research vessel Sejong was next. Dr. Hai Jin, the ship's xenobiology specialist, sent detailed information about the Void Swarm. Admiral Insu, her message began. I have been studying reports about this machine intelligence for weeks. The swarm appears to be self-replicating. It breaks down matter at the molecular level and uses the materials to build more of itself. However, I believe there are weaknesses we can exploit. More ships answered the call. The cargo hauler Incheon had basic weapons, but a powerful engine. The mining vessel Ulsan carried explosives and drilling equipment that could be used as weapons. Even the small patrol boat Jeju offered to help. But the most important response came from Sergeant Wu Jin and his Marine unit aboard the troop transport Gangwon. Admiral, Wu Jin's message said, my Marines are ready for boarding operations. If this swarm uses ships, we can take them from the inside. Insu looked at the tactical display showing all the human vessels converging on the rendezvous point. It was not a large fleet, but it was what they had. Admiral, Commander Lee said, quietly, the other galactic governments are starting to notice our ship movements. We are getting diplomatic inquiries. What kind of inquiries? The Altarian Federation wants to know why human warships are heading toward their territory. The Nexus Collective is demanding explanations for our aggressive posture. Insu laughed, but there was no humor in it. Aggressive posture. They have no idea. He walked to the main viewing screen and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, alien diplomats were probably having emergency meetings about the human fleet. They would be worried about human intentions, human violence, human unpredictability. They were right to be worried. Sir, said his communications officer, I am receiving a transmission from Dr. Haye Jin on the Sejong. She says she has important information about swarm tactics. Put her on screen. Dr. Haye Jin appeared on the main display. She was a small woman with intelligent eyes and graying hair. Behind her, the research lab of the Sejong was full of computer displays and data analysis. Equipment. Admiral, she said, I have been analyzing every report about void swarm attacks. The machines follow a predictable pattern. They send scout units first, then small attack groups, then the main swarm. What does that mean for us? Insu asked. It means they will not expect a counterattack during the initial phase. Most species try to defend their planets from a distance. The swarm is programmed to deal with defensive tactics, but not offensive ones. Exactly. If we hit them while they are still deploying, we might be able to disrupt their coordination. Commander Lee stepped forward. Doctor, our intelligence reports say the swarm has already destroyed 17 Valerian colonies. How did they do that if the machines are vulnerable during deployment? Dr. Haye Jin's expression became grim. Because no one has ever been crazy enough to attack them directly. Every species that has encountered the swarm has tried to run or hide. No one has ever charged straight at them. Until now, Insu said. 18 hours later, the human fleet reached the edge of Valerian space. 15 ships of various sizes and capabilities, all armed and ready for battle. It was not the largest fleet in galactic history, but every ship was crewed by humans who had grown up hearing stories about the dangerous worlds their ancestors had survived. Admiral Insu stood on the bridge of the Busan's Pride and looked at the tactical display. The void swarm was already in the outer system, consuming the metal-rich asteroids and turning them into more machines. Admiral, reported his sensor officer, the Valerian homeworld is broadcasting continuous distress signals. Their remaining defense platforms are trying to slow down the swarm advance. How much time do they have? 6 hours, maybe 7. Insu activated the fleet communication system. Every human ship could hear his voice. This is Admiral Insu to all vessels. Today we repay a debt that is hundreds of years old. The Valerians helped save our people when we had nowhere else to go. Now we are going to save theirs. He paused, looking around his bridge at officers who had volunteered for what might be a suicide mission. I will not lie to you. We are probably going to die today. The void swarm has destroyed every force sent against it. But we are not every force. We are humans. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day, and we survived. We learned to fight things bigger and stronger than us, and we won. The fleet was moving into attack formation. Small, fast ships on the flanks, heavy vessels in the center, support ships ready to provide covering fire. Remember, Insu continued, we are not here to follow the rules of civilized warfare. We are here to win. Use every weapon you have. Take every advantage you can find. Fight dirty, fight mean, and do not stop until every last machine is scrap metal. Captain Deho's voice came over the communication system from the New Sol. Admiral, the Valerians are sending us landing coordinates. They want to evacuate their leadership to our ships. Tell them we are not here to evacuate anyone, Insu replied. We are here to kill the things that want to hurt them. The human fleet moved deeper into the system, heading directly toward the Void Swarm. Behind them, alien governments were frantically trying to contact human leadership, demanding explanations. But the humans were done explaining. It was time to remind the galaxy why their species had earned the name Deathworlders. Ambassador Kylo had never seen anything like the human fleet. He stood in the Valerian Defense Command Center, watching the tactical displays with growing amazement and terror. The human ships moved through space in ways that seemed impossible. They accelerated at speeds that should have killed their crews, made turns that should have torn their hulls apart, and approached the Void Swarm like predators hunting prey. How are they doing that? Asked Defense Commander Nix, pointing at the screen. A human assault frigate had just performed a combat maneuver that involved spinning while firing in 3 different directions. I do not know, Kylo admitted. Our ships cannot move like that. The forces would crush us. Maybe the stories about them were true, whispered Technical Officer Zin. Maybe they really are monsters. On the main screen, the Void Swarm was spreading across the outer system like a dark cloud. Millions of machine units, each one the size of a fighter craft, worked together with perfect coordination. Behind them came larger vessels, destroyers and cruisers made of black metal that seemed to absorb light. The swarm had been moving toward the Valerian home world for hours, consuming everything in its path. 3 defense platforms had tried to stop them. The machines had eaten the platforms and used the metal to build more units. But now something was different. The human ships were not running away or trying to hide behind defensive positions. They were racing directly toward the swarm at maximum speed. Incoming transmission from the human flagship, announced Communications Officer Dal. Put it on screen, Kylo ordered. The face of Admiral In-Su appeared on the display. He was a middle-aged human with gray hair and cold eyes. Behind him, the bridge of his ship was full of activity as crew members prepared for battle. Ambassador Kylo, the Admiral, said, "We received your distress signal. We are here to help." "Admiral, we are grateful, but you must understand. The Void Swarm has destroyed 17 of our colonies. Our entire military could not stop them." "Your military fought a defensive battle," Insu replied. "We are going to fight a human battle." The connection ended. Kylo stared at the empty screen, wondering what that meant. "Sir," called sensor technician Vor from her station, "the human ships they are not slowing down. They are still accelerating toward the swarm." Kylo looked at the tactical display. The human fleet looked tiny compared to the massive swarm, like insects flying toward a storm cloud, but the insects were moving very fast and seemed to have no fear. "Are they going to ram the machines?" asked Commander Nix. Before anyone could answer, the first human ship reached the edge of the swarm formation. Captain Ji-hoon of the assault frigate Gwangju opened fire with every weapon his ship carried. Plasma cannons, missile launchers, and kinetic rail guns all fired at once. The small frigate disappeared into a cloud of its own weapon fire as it tore through the swarm's outer edge. Dozens of machine units exploded, but the swarm barely seemed to notice the damage. More units moved to fill the gaps, and return fire lit up space around the human ship. "The frigate is taking heavy damage," reported Vor. "Their shields are failing." On the screen, the Gwangju was surrounded by enemy fire. Its hull was glowing red from heat damage, and parts of the ship were breaking off. But instead of retreating, Captain Ji-hoon did something that made every Valerian in the command center gasp. He aimed his damaged ship directly at the largest. "Swarm vessel in sight and increase speed." "He is going to ram it," whispered Commander Nix. "He is going to crash his ship into them on purpose." The Gwangju hit the swarm dreadnought at nearly the speed of light. The explosion was so bright that the tactical sensors had to dim their displays to protect Valerian eyes. When the light faded, both ships were gone. "Tactical assessment," Kylo ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. "The human frigate and the swarm dreadnought have been completely destroyed," Vor reported. "The explosion also damaged or destroyed approximately 200 smaller swarm units." "One ship for 200, said Commander Nix quietly. "That is not a trade ratio. That is a statement." The rest of the human fleet reached the swarm formation moments later. What happened next was unlike any space battle the Valerians had ever seen. Human ships did not fight like civilized beings. They fought like the apex predators they had evolved to be. The heavy cruiser Busan's Pride used its main guns to punch holes through swarm formations, then sent smaller ships through the gaps to attack from behind. The research vessel Sejong launched clouds of experimental nanobots that confused swarm sensors and made their coordination fail. Most terrifying of all was the way human pilots flew their ships. They performed maneuvers that should have been impossible, using the gravity of nearby planets to slingshot around obstacles, flying through asteroid fields at full speed, and using their own weapons' explosions to change direction. "How are they surviving those acceleration forces?" asked Technical Officer Zin. Ambassador Kylo remembered something from the old files about Deathworlders. Their planet had very high gravity. They evolved to be stronger than most species, and they learned to build machines that could survive anything their world could do to them. On the tactical display, the cargo hauler Incheon was doing something. That made no tactical sense. It was flying directly into the middle of a swarm formation, ignoring all the weapons fire directed at it. "What is that ship doing?" asked Commander Nix. "It has no weapons." "It has something better," Kylo said, reading the sensor data. "It is full of refined metals and industrial explosives." The Incheon reached the center of the swarm formation and detonated its entire cargo hold. The explosion was smaller than the Gwangju's sacrifice, but it created a chain reaction that destroyed dozens of swarm units and disrupted their formation. "They are using their own cargo as weapons," Vor said in amazement. "They turned a transport ship into a bomb." The battle continued for 3 hours. Human ships darted in and out of the swarm formation like predatory fish attacking a school of smaller creatures. They used tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare: ramming attacks, suicide runs, weapons that were banned by galactic treaties. But it was working. The Void Swarm, which had seemed unstoppable, was being torn apart piece by piece. "Swarm. Coordination is breaking down," reported Vor. "They are having trouble adapting to human tactics." "Why?" asked Commander Nix. Ambassador Kylo thought he understood. "Because no civilized species fights like this. The machines were programmed to deal with logical, predictable enemies. They do not know how to handle opponents who are willing to die to achieve their objectives." On the screen, the mining vessel Ulsan was using its industrial drilling equipment to bore through the hull of a swarm cruiser. Once inside, it detonated mining charges that tore the enemy ship apart from within. "They are not just fighting to win," Kylo said quietly. "They are fighting like they have nothing to lose." A new voice came over the communication system. It was Captain Daeho from the New Soul. "Valerian Defense Command. This is Captain Daeho. We have broken the swarm's main formation. Their central command ship is exposed. We are going to take it out, but we need your people to stay clear of the blast zone." "Captain," Kylo replied, "that command ship is massive. How do you plan to destroy it?" "The same way we destroy everything else," Daeho answered, by hitting it very hard until it stops moving. The new Soul began its final attack run. The colony ship was not designed for combat, but its human crew had turned it into a weapon anyway. They had mounted every spare gun they could find on the hull and filled the cargo bays with explosives. As the new Soul raced toward the swarm command ship, smaller human vessels provided covering fire. The assault frigate Mokpo flew alongside, its weapons clearing a path through the defensive screen. "Sir," called Vor urgently, "the human colony ship is taking massive damage. They will not survive another minute of that weapon's fire." On the screen, the new Soul was burning. Parts of its hull were melting away under the swarm's concentrated attack, but it kept flying toward its target. At the last moment, Captain Deho sent one final message. "Tell the galaxy that humans remember their debts." The new Soul crashed into the swarm command ship and exploded. The blast was so powerful that it created a new star for a few seconds. When the light faded, both ships were gone, and the remaining swarm units were drifting aimlessly through space without coordination. The battle was over. Ambassador Kylo stood in the silent command center, staring at the tactical display. The void swarm that had seemed unstoppable was now nothing but scattered debris and powerless machines. "Sir," whispered Technical Officer Zin, "what do we tell the galaxy about what happened here?" Kylo thought about the human ships that had sacrificed themselves to save his people. Ships crewed by beings that other species called monsters. "We tell them the truth," he said. "We tell them that when civilized beings had given up hope, the monsters came to save us." Commander Sora had never enjoyed boarding enemy ships, but she was very good at it. The airlock of the Gang 1 opened with a soft hiss, and she led her Marine squad into the docking tube that connected to the Void Swarm hive ship. Behind her came 12 of the best fighters humanity had produced, soldiers who had trained for years to fight in the worst conditions imaginable. "Remember," she said over the radio, "these machines adapt to our tactics. Do not use the same attack twice. Keep moving, keep changing, and do not let them predict what you will do next." The hive ship was massive, over 3 kilometers long, and filled with manufacturing facilities that turned raw matter into more swarm units. Intelligence reports suggested that destroying the ship's central processing core would shut down production for this entire sector. But first, they had to get inside. The docking tube ended at a heavy blast door that was designed to keep boarders out. Sergeant Kim, the squad's demolitions expert, placed shaped charges around the door frame. "Fire in the hole," he announced. The explosion tore through the blast door like it was made of paper. Sora and her Marines rushed through the opening into the ship's interior. The inside of the hive ship was unlike anything they had seen before. The corridors were not built for living beings. They were designed for machines. The ceilings were too low, the corners too sharp, and everything was made of the same black metal that seemed to absorb light. Motion sensors are picking up movement. "Ahead," reported Corporal Park, checking her scanner. "Multiple contacts, moving fast." "How many?" Sora asked. "Too many to count." The first wave of defenders came around the corner like a metal flood. Swarm units the size of large dogs, moving on 6 legs and armed with plasma cutters designed for construction work. The machines had adapted their tools into weapons. Sora's Marines opened fire with kinetic weapons, bullets that could punch through armor and keep going. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Sparks flew as metal rounds hit metal targets. But the swarm units were fast and smart. They scattered along the walls and ceiling, trying to surround the human squad. "They are learning our fire patterns," called Private Lee. "They know how to avoid our weapons." "Then we change the rules," Sora said. She pulled a grenade from her belt, but instead of throwing it at the machines, she threw it at the ceiling. The explosion brought down a section of metal plating, crushing several swarm units and blocking the corridor behind them. "Environmental warfare," she explained to her squad. "Do not fight the machines. Fight the ship itself." Meanwhile, on the other side of the battle, Pilot Hyunwoo was having his own problems with adaptation. The atmospheric fighter Sol Wind screamed through the upper atmosphere of the Valerian home world, chasing swarm dropships that were trying to land ground forces. The alien planet's thick air and high gravity made flying difficult, but Hyun-woo had trained for worse conditions. "Control, this is Sol Wind," he reported over the radio. "I have visual on 6 enemy dropships heading for the capital city." "Copy. Sol Wind," came the voice of Communications Officer Yoon-ji from the Orbital Command Center. "You are authorized to engage." Hyun-woo banked hard to the right and opened fire with his fighter's plasma cannons. The first dropship exploded in a ball of fire, but the others immediately changed their flight patterns. "They are adapting," he muttered. "They know I am here now." The remaining dropships split up and began flying in random directions, making it harder for him to target all of them. Worse, they were firing back with weapons that seemed designed specifically to counter his fighter's systems. But Hyun-woo had grown up flying through the asteroid fields near human colonies. He had learned to fly in places where one mistake meant death. He shut down his fighter's engines and let gravity pull him into a steep dive. The swarm dropships, programmed to track powered flight, lost him for a few crucial seconds. When he restarted the engines at the last possible moment, he was behind 2 of the enemy ships. "Gotcha," he said, and fired. Both dropships exploded before their programming could adapt to his new tactic. Back on the hive ship, Commander Sora and her Marines had fought their way to the central processing core. The room was enormous, a cathedral of machinery where massive computers processed data from across the swarm network. But they were not alone. The swarm had created new defenders specifically to stop them. Machine units that looked almost human, but moved too fast and hit too hard to be anything natural. "They are copying us," said Sergeant Kim, staring at the enemy machines. "They are making robots that fight like humans." "Then we stop fighting like humans," Sora replied. She activated her suit's emergency oxygen supply and threw a breach charge at the nearest wall. The explosion tore a hole in the ship's hull, and atmosphere began rushing out into space. The human, Marines protected by their environmental suits, stayed in the room. But the swarm's human-like robots had not been designed for vacuum combat. They shut down one by one as their systems failed. "Sometimes the best way to win is to change the game completely," Sora explained as her squad moved toward the central processing core. High above the planet, Communications Officer Yoon-ji was coordinating attacks across 17 different fronts. She sat in the command center of the Sejong, surrounded by screens showing battles across the entire star system. "Gangwon team, you are clear to proceed to Objective 2, she transmitted to another Marine squad. "Ulsan, change your approach. Vector to avoid the defensive grid. Jeju, provide covering fire for the Valerian evacuation ships." The Void Swarm had originally seemed impossible to fight because it could adapt to any tactic. But Yoon-ji had discovered something important. The machines could only adapt to tactics they had seen before. Humans kept inventing new ways to fight. "Admiral Insu," she reported to the fleet commander, "all boarding parties are in position. Ground defense is holding. The swarm is having trouble processing our tactical variations." "What do you mean?" Insu asked. "They expect enemies to be logical. They expect consistent tactics and predictable strategies. But humans do not fight logically. We fight emotionally. We take risks that make no mathematical sense. We sacrifice efficiency for surprise." On her screens, Yoon-ji could see human ships and fighters performing maneuvers that violated every rule of space combat. Pilots flew through explosions to attack from unexpected directions. Ships used their own weapons fire to change course. Marines fought inside enemy vessels by destroying the ships around them. "The machines are trying to create counter-tactics," she continued. "But by the time they adapt to one human strategy, we have already switched to something completely different." Commander So-ra reached the central processing core and placed her charges. The massive computer system was the brain that controlled swarm production across this entire sector of space. "Charges set," she reported. 60 seconds to detonation. But the swarm had one last surprise. As her squad prepared to evacuate, new defenders emerged from hidden panels in the walls. These machines looked exactly like humans, down to the smallest detail. "They are perfect copies," whispered Corporal Park. "How do we fight ourselves?" Sora smiled grimly. "Easy. We remember that we are not perfect." She pulled the pins from 2 grenades and held them in her hands. The copies would expect her to throw them. Instead, she ran directly at the enemy machines, carrying the grenades with her. The explosion destroyed Sora, the machine copies, and a large section of the processing core. Her sacrifice created enough damage to ensure the charges would finish. The job. "Commander Sora is down," Sergeant Kim reported as he led the surviving Marines to the extraction point. Mission accomplished. Across the battle zone, similar scenes were playing out. Human fighters crashed their damaged ships into enemy formations. Marine squads used environmental hazards as weapons. Ships attacked in ways that made no tactical sense but achieved their objectives anyway. Pilot Hyun-woo, running low on ammunition, used his fighter as a kinetic weapon to destroy the last enemy dropship. The impact killed him instantly, but it also saved the Valerian capital city from invasion. Communications officer Eun-ji, coordinating the final phase of the battle, noticed something important on her sensors. "Admiral," she reported, "the swarm is withdrawing. Their remaining units are leaving the system." Withdrawing? Why? "According to my analysis, they can no longer predict human behavior patterns. Their programming is telling them that humans are too dangerous to fight effectively." Admiral. In-Soo looked at the tactical display. The human fleet had lost 8 ships and hundreds of crew members, but they had done something that no other species had ever accomplished. They had made the Void Swarm retreat. "Communications officer," he said, "send a message to all human vessels. Mission accomplished. The Valerians are safe." Yunji sent the message, then added her own observation to the report. "Admiral, I think we just taught the galaxy something important about human warfare." "What is that?" "We do not fight to win according to their rules. We fight to win according to ours. And our rules say that sometimes the best strategy is to have no strategy at all." The battle was over, but the real consequences were just beginning. Across the galaxy, alien governments were receiving reports about what the humans had done. The species that everyone called monsters had just saved an entire civilization. Lieutenant Mi-young became Captain Mi-young in the worst possible way. She stood on the bridge of the New Seoul, watching Captain Dae-ho's final moments on the tactical display. His ship was a burning wreck racing toward the swarm command vessel, its hull melting under concentrated enemy fire. But he never slowed down, never changed course, never hesitated. The explosion when the New Seoul hit its target was so bright that the bridge lights automatically dimmed to protect her eyes. When the glare faded, both ships were gone, leaving only expanding clouds of debris and energy. "Captain Dae-ho is gone," reported Ensign Han from the communications station. His young voice was shaking. "All hands lost." Mi-young felt something cold settle in her chest. Dae-ho had been more than her commanding officer. He had been her mentor, her friend, and the closest thing to family she had in space. But there was no time to grieve. The battle was still going. "On, I have command," she announced to the bridge crew. "Continue the mission." The remaining human ships were scattered across the Valerian system, pursuing the broken remnants of the Void Swarm. What had once been an unstoppable force was now just individual machine units fleeing in random directions. "New contact on sensors," called Tactical Officer Min. "It is Admiral In-Soo on the Busan's Pride." The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen. His ship showed signs of heavy damage, scorch marks across the hull, missing armor plates, and atmosphere leaking from several breaches. "Captain Mi-young," he said formally, acknowledging her field promotion. "Status report." "The Swarm Command Network has been destroyed," she replied. Enemy coordination has broken down completely. Local swarm units are fleeing the system. Casualties. Mi-young looked at the tactical display showing the positions of human vessels. Too many icons were dark now, representing ships that would never return home. We have lost 8 ships and approximately 400 crew members. The New Seoul, Gwangju, Incheon, Mokpo, Gangwon, Seoul Wind, and 2 support vessels. Admiral In-soo was quiet for a moment. 8 ships out of 15. More than half their force. Gone. But the Valerians are safe, Mi-young added. The planet is secure. Yes, In-soo agreed. They are safe. 3 hours later, Mi-young stood in the docking bay of the Valerian space station that served as the system's main orbital facility. Around her, the surviving members of the human fleet were being treated for injuries and debriefed by Valerian officials. Ambassador Kylo approached her with careful steps. The Valerian diplomat looked older than he had before the battle, as if the stress of nearly losing his entire species had aged him years in a single day. "Captain Mi-young," he said, "I wanted to thank you personally for what your people have done. You saved our entire civilization." "We paid a debt," Mi-young replied simply. "Your people helped save humanity during our colonial exodus. We could not forget that." "The cost was very high," Kylo observed, looking around at the wounded human, crews. "So many of your people died for us." Mi-young thought about Captain Daeho's final words. "Tell the galaxy that humans remember their debts." "That is what humans do," she said. "We remember who helped us, and we help them when they need it, no matter what the cost." But even as she spoke, Mi-young knew that the cost was about to get much higher. Dr. Hae-jin from the research vessel Sejong had made a discovery that changed everything. She found Mi-young in the station's medical bay, where human wounded were being treated alongside Valerian casualties. "Captain," Dr. Hae-jin said quietly, "I need to show you something. Something I found in the swarm data cores we recovered." They walked to a secure briefing room, where Dr. Hae-jin activated a holographic display. Technical readouts and star charts filled the air above them. The Void Swarm was not the original threat, Dr. Hae-jin explained. It was running from something else. Running from what? "According to the data I recovered, there is something in the galactic core, something that made the swarm flee toward the outer territories. The machines were not trying to conquer this region, they were trying to escape." Mi-young studied the star charts. The galactic core was thousands of light years away, in the most densely populated region of known space. What could make the Void Swarm run away? "I do not know," Dr. Hae-jin admitted. "But whatever it is, it destroyed the swarm's original fleet. What we fought here was just a small survivor group." The implications were terrifying. If something in the galactic core was dangerous enough to make the Void Swarm flee, then the galaxy's most populated worlds were in danger. "Have you told anyone else about this?" Mi-young asked. "Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first." Mi-young thought about the human fleet, reduced to 7 damaged ships and exhausted crews. They had barely survived fighting a small part of the swarm. How could they face something that had destroyed the entire original force? "Keep this information classified for now," she decided. "We need time to figure out what it means." 2 days. Later, Mi-young stood before the Valerian High Council to receive their formal thanks. The ceremony was broadcast across Valerian space, and she knew that recordings would soon reach every major alien government. "Captain Mi-young," Chief Counselor Vex said in his formal speech, "you and your people have shown that even in our darkest hour, hope remains. You have proven that the bonds of friendship can overcome any obstacle." The words were nice, but Mi-young could see the fear in the Valerians' eyes. They were grateful, yes, but they were also terrified. They had seen what humans could do when they decided to fight. After the ceremony, Ambassador Kylo walked with her through the station's observation deck. Outside the transparent walls, Valerian ships were cleaning up the debris from the battle. "Captain," Kylo said carefully, "there is something I must ask you. During the battle, your people used tactics that violated several galactic warfare conventions, such as ramming attacks, suicide strikes, weapons that are banned under the Galactic Peace Accords." Mi-young looked out at the debris field, where the new Soul had made its final attack. Somewhere in that wreckage were the remains of Captain Day-Ho and his crew. "Ambassador," she said, "when someone is trying to kill your friends, you do not worry about following rules. You worry about winning. But surely there must be limits, lines that civilized beings do not cross. Maybe that is the difference between humans and civilized beings," Mi-young replied. "We cross any line we have to cross." Kylo was quiet for a long moment. "The other galactic governments are asking questions," he said finally. "They want to know why the Valerians called upon your people. They are concerned about the precedent this sets." "What kind of precedent?" "That in times of crisis, species might turn to the Deathworlders instead of seeking diplomatic solutions." Mi-young laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They are not worried about precedent. They are worried that other species will realize humans are willing to fight when no one else will." She turned away from the observation window to face the ambassador directly. "Tell your government something, Kylo. Tell them that humans did not want to be called monsters. We did not choose to be exiled to the edge of space. But if being monsters is what it takes to protect innocent people, then we will be the best monsters the galaxy has ever seen." A week later, Mi-young received new orders from Human Colonial Command. The surviving ships of her fleet were to return to human space immediately. There would be no victory celebrations, no public recognition of their sacrifice. "We are proud of what you accomplished," the message said, "but your actions have created diplomatic complications. It is best if you return quietly." Mi-young gathered her crew for the departure ceremony. The 7 remaining human ships formed up in a convoy, ready to begin the long journey back to the galactic rim. But before they left, she sent one final message to Valerian space. "This is Captain Mi-young of the Human Colonial Fleet. We came when you called for help, and we always will. Remember that when the galaxy tells you that humans are dangerous. We are dangerous to the things that want to hurt you." The human fleet departed Valerian space, leaving behind the wreckage of their victory and the knowledge that somewhere in the galactic core, something even worse was waiting. Dr. Hae-jin's final report contained one more disturbing detail that she had not shared with anyone. According to the swarm data cores, whatever was in the galactic core was not just dangerous, it was intelligent, and it was learning. The galaxy had just discovered that humans were willing to be monsters to protect their friends. Soon they might learn that being monsters was the only way to survive what was coming. The Galactic Assembly had never seen anything like the emergency session that followed the Valerian incident. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the massive station that orbited the neutral world of Concordia. The debates had been going on for 3 days, and tempers were running high. "The humans violated 13 separate warfare conventions," declared Ambassador Zek of the Altarian Federation, his scaled face flushed with anger. "They used banned weapons, conducted suicide attacks, and showed complete disregard for civilized combat protocols. They saved an entire species from extinction," replied Ambassador Tor of the Nexus Collective, her voice calm but firm. "Surely that counts for something." "Does it?" demanded Minister Rax of the Hegemony Council. "Today they saved the Valerians. Tomorrow they might decide our governments need saving too. Who is to stop them?" Ambassador Kylo sat in the Valerian section, listening to the debate with growing unease. In the 3 weeks since the battle, he had received hundreds of communications from other governments. Some thanked the Valerians for their courage. Others accused them of bringing the Deathworlders into civilized space. The question before us, announced Speaker Pro, the Assembly's neutral moderator. is whether the human intervention sets a dangerous precedent. Do we allow species to call upon irregular forces when facing existential threats? The human delegation sat in, a section that had been hastily added to the assembly chamber. For decades, humans had been excluded from galactic politics. Now they were here as reluctant participants in a trial that would determine their future. Captain Mi Young wore her dress uniform, the dark blue fabric crisp and formal. Beside her sat diplomatic attaché Jae Sung, a career diplomat who had spent years trying to improve humanity's reputation. He looked uncomfortable with the attention. "The humans have requested permission to address the assembly," Speaker Pro announced. "Captain Mi Young, you may speak." Mi Young stood and walked to the central speaking platform. Around her, hundreds of alien faces watched with mixtures of curiosity, fear, and hostility. "Honored delegates," she began, "I want to be clear about something. Humans did not ask to be excluded from this assembly. We did not choose to be called monsters, and we did not want to be the species that others fear." The chamber was completely silent. "But we are what we are," she continued. "We come from a world that tried to kill us every day. We evolved to survive in conditions that would destroy most of the species represented here. That evolution made us dangerous, yes, but it also made us something else." "And what is that?" called out Ambassador Zek. "Loyal," Mi Young replied simply. "When the Valerians called for help, we did not ask about galactic politics or diplomatic consequences. We asked one question. Do we owe them a debt?" The answer was yes. She activated a holographic display that showed images from the battle against the Void Swarm. "You say we violated warfare conventions. You are correct. We used banned weapons, conducted suicide attacks, and fought without regard for your rules. But let me ask you something. Where were your fleets when the Valerians were dying?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. "The Altarian Federation received the Valerian distress signals," Mi Young continued. "So did the Nexus Collective and the Hegemony Council. You all knew what was happening, but none of you came to help." Ambassador Zek stood angrily. "We followed proper diplomatic channels. We were organizing a response." "How long would that response have taken?" Mi Young asked. "Hours, days, weeks. The Valerians had 36 hours before extinction. How long do your diplomatic channels take?" "Civilized beings do not rush into violence," declared Minister Rax. "We seek peaceful solutions." "There was no peaceful solution to the Void Swarm," Mi Young replied. "They do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They consume everything in their path until something stops them." She changed the holographic display to show tactical analysis of the battle. "You want to know why humans won when your conventional forces would have failed? Because we did not fight a conventional battle. We fought a human battle. We used every advantage we had, including our willingness to die for people we care about." Diplomatic attaché Jae Sung joined her at the platform. His role was to soften the diplomatic impact of Mi Young's direct approach. "Honorable delegates," he said in a more formal tone, "humanity understands your concerns about our methods. We are willing to discuss limitations on our future involvement in galactic affairs." "What kind of limitations?" asked Speaker Pro. "We propose a new protocol," Jae Sung explained. "Humans will only respond to emergency calls under specific circumstances. The threat must be existential. All other options must be exhausted. And the requesting species must formally accept responsibility for calling us." Ambassador Kylo stood from the Valerian section. "The Valerian Republic formally accepts full responsibility for requesting human assistance. We would make the same choice again." But Ambassador Zek was not satisfied. "This still does not address the fundamental problem. Humans are too dangerous to be allowed unrestricted access to civilized space." "Then maybe," Mi Young said quietly, "the problem is not that humans are too dangerous. Maybe the problem is that the rest of you are not dangerous enough." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Several delegates demanded that Mi Young be removed from the platform. Speaker Pro called for order. When the noise died down, he addressed the human delegation directly. Captain Mi Young, are you suggesting that other species should become more like humans? I am suggesting that sometimes the galaxy needs someone willing to be the monster, she replied. You have built a beautiful civilization based on diplomacy and peaceful cooperation. But what happens when that civilization faces something that does not care about your values? She gestured to the tactical display again. The Void Swarm destroyed 17 Valerian colonies before we stopped it. How many colonies would it have destroyed if we had followed your diplomatic protocols? How many species would have gone extinct while you organized a proper response? Ambassador Tor of the Nexus Collective spoke up. The humans raise a valid point. Our systems are designed for managing conflicts between rational actors. We are less effective against existential threats. Which is exactly why you need us, Mi Young said. You do not have to like us. You do not have to trust us. But when something threatens to destroy everything you have built, you need someone willing to fight dirty to protect it. Minister Rax stood again. And who decides when that point is reached? Who determines when the rules no longer apply? The same people who are facing extinction, Mi Young answered. Species that are about to die should be allowed to choose their own salvation, even if that salvation comes from monsters. The debate continued for 2 more hours. Finally, Speaker Pro called for a formal vote on the human proposal. All those in favor of establishing the emergency response protocol, allowing limited human intervention in existential threat situations? The vote was close. 24 in favor, 23 opposed. The measure passed by a single vote. The protocol is approved, Speaker Pro announced. Humans may respond to emergency calls under the specified conditions. After the session ended, Captain Mi Young and diplomatic attaché Jae Sung walked through the station's corridors. Around them, alien delegates moved in small groups, still discussing the day's events. That could have gone better, Jae Sung observed. Could have gone worse, too, Mi Young replied. At least now we have official permission to be the galaxy's emergency monsters. They reached the observation deck overlooking Concordia. The peaceful world below showed no signs of war or conflict, just cities full of beings who had never faced an existential threat. Captain, Jae Sung said carefully, do you really think the other species are not dangerous enough? Mi Young thought about Captain Daeho's sacrifice, about Commander So-Ra's final attack, about all the humans who had died to save people they had never met. I think they have forgotten what it means to fight for something more important than their own lives, she said. That is not their fault. They built a peaceful galaxy. But peace only works when everyone agrees to be peaceful. And when someone does not agree, then you need people like us. People who remember that sometimes the only way to preserve civilization is to temporarily abandon it. A new message appeared on Jae Sung's communication device. He read it quickly, then looked up with concern. Captain, we just received intelligence from our deep space monitoring stations. There are energy readings from the galactic core. Something big is moving out there. Mi Young remembered Dr. Hai Jin's warning about whatever had driven the Void Swarm to the outer territories. How long before it reaches civilized space? She asked. Unknown. But if the readings are accurate, it is much larger than the Void Swarm. Mi Young looked down at the peaceful world below, where billions of beings lived without knowing that something terrible was coming for them. Send a message to Human Colonial Command, she ordered. Tell them to start preparing the fleet. Something tells me the galaxy is going to need its monsters again very soon. 6 months after the Valerian incident, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy new normal. Captain Mi Young stood in the command center of the human frontier station New Busan, watching the communication displays that showed incoming messages from across known space. The station orbited a dead world on the edge of human territory, far from the civilized worlds of the galactic core. But lately, those civilized worlds had been sending a lot of messages to the edge of space. Another consultation request announced. Communications Officer Park reading from her screen. This one from the Zephyrian Confederacy. They are having problems with automated mining systems that have gone rogue. What kind of problems? Mi Young asked. The mining robots have started attacking their settlements. The Confederacy military cannot shut them down. Chief Medical Officer Young Mi looked up from her medical reports. That makes 7 consultation requests this month. The Altarians wanted help with a plague that their medicine could not cure. The Nexus Collective had problems with space pirates. Even the Hegemony Council asked for advice about asteroid defense. Mi Young walked to the main viewing screen and looked out at the stars. Human space was small compared to the vast territories controlled by other species, but it was growing. New colonies were being established every month as humans spread along the galactic rim. They are starting to realize something, she said. Peaceful civilizations are very good at managing peaceful problems, but when something goes wrong, really wrong, they need people who know how to fight. Strategic analyst Dong Hyun joined the conversation from his station. He was a quiet man who spent his time studying galactic politics and military developments. Captain, I have been analyzing the pattern of requests. Most of them involve situations where conventional solutions have failed. The requesting species are not asking us to fight their wars. They are asking us to solve problems that their own people cannot handle. And what does that tell us? It tells us that the galaxy is changing. The old assumption that all problems can be solved through diplomacy and technology is breaking down. Mi Young thought about the reports that had been coming in from deep space monitoring stations, strange energy readings from the galactic core, unexplained disappearances of scout ships, and sensor contacts that did not match any known technology. Dr. Hai Jin's research into the Void Swarm data had revealed more disturbing information. Whatever had driven the machines from the galactic core was still out there, and it was getting closer to civilized space. Young Mi Young said, how are our humanitarian aid protocols working? Chief Medical Officer Young Mi had spent the last 6 months developing new ways for humans to help other species without terrifying them. Her medical teams had provided disaster relief to 3 different worlds, always working carefully to avoid seeming threatening. Better than expected, Young Mi replied. The key is to let them ask for help instead of offering it. When species request medical assistance, they are less afraid of us. They see us as helpers instead of invaders. Any problems? Some. The Valerian refugees we helped on Kepler Station were grateful, but they were also clearly nervous around our medical teams. They kept asking why humans were being so kind. Mi Young understood the confusion. The galaxy's image of humans was still dominated by stories of violence and danger. The idea that the same species that had destroyed the Void Swarm could also provide medical care was difficult for many aliens to accept. Communications, she called. What is the status of the Zephyrian request? They are asking for a small team of technical specialists to help with their rogue mining systems. No military intervention requested. Approved. Send Engineer Lee and his team. Tell them to be polite and keep their weapons locked away. This had become the new pattern. Alien governments would face a problem they could not solve, debate for weeks about whether to ask humans for help, then send carefully worded requests for consultation or technical assistance. The humans would respond with small teams of specialists who solved the problem quickly and efficiently, then left without asking for payment or political concessions. It was working, slowly. Captain, Dong Hyun said from his analysis station, I have been thinking about our long-term strategy. We cannot continue responding to crisis calls indefinitely. Eventually, we will face something we cannot handle. Such as? Whatever drove the Void Swarm from the galactic core. Dr. Hai Jin's latest reports suggest it is still active and moving toward populated space. Mi Young had been thinking about this problem for months. The human fleet was small compared to the military forces of major alien civilizations. They had succeeded against the Void Swarm through tactics and willingness to sacrifice, but those advantages would not work against every threat. What do you recommend? We need to start building alliances, real partnerships, not just emergency response agreements. With who? Most species are still afraid of us. With the ones who are not, Dong-hyun replied. The Valerians trust us completely. Now, some of the smaller frontier civilizations have positive relationships with human colonies. We should start there. Before Mi Young could respond, the communication system activated with an emergency signal. This was not a consultation request or a diplomatic message. This was a last resort protocol beacon. Source? Mi Young asked quickly. Deep Space Monitoring Station Gamma 7, Park reported. It is. Captain, this signal is not coming from any known species. What do you mean? The signal format matches the old emergency response protocol, but the source codes are not in any of our databases. Whoever sent this, we have never encountered them before.